Okay, welcome, fellow Republicans, to the 2023 Amos Tuck Dinner. I'm Chris Sager, the New Hampshire Republican Party Chairman. Pleased that you all made it here tonight. Would you please rise for the invocation by Pastor Peter Chamberlain of Granite State Baptist Church, and remain standing for the pledge by Manchester City Republican Committee Chair Brittany Ping, and for the national anthem by Isabella Peters.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the privilege and the honor that it is to be able to gather together tonight in freedom. We thank you for the honor to be able to sit with such great warriors and defenders of freedom and life and liberty. Lord, I do pray your greatest blessing upon this evening. Thank you for Governor DeSantis being able to make it in safely. Lord, for each and every one as we traveled in. Now, Lord, would you bless throughout this evening? Thank you for the wonderful meal that's been prepared. Have your will and way, Lord, as we stand for freedom and life. Lord, I do pray that you would give courage and strength to be able to continue the stand, Lord, of those freedoms that we hold so dear to us, that have been granted to us by our Creator. Now, Lord, give us a wonderful evening together, and we ask it in your Son's name. Amen.
I got the easy part. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the great performance, Isabel. Please be seated. So, fellow Republicans from the Granite State, today begins our march to victory on November 5th, 2024. We need to do this not only for ourselves, but for our posterity. The Democrats' disastrous policies must be stopped and reversed, and only we can do it, just like Amos Tuck did in 1853 when in Exeter he met and founded the Republican Party for the same reason, to stop the disastrous policies of Democrats with slavery. Today, we need to stop the economic and international destruction of this country by Joe Biden, the Democrats in Washington, and we've got to keep control in the state here. We need to give our state Senate some additional majority. We would like to thank Senate President Jeb Bradley for doing a fantastic job. Thank you, Senator. And his predecessor, we see former Senate President Chuck Morse. Thank you, Chuck. We also have a slim margin in the House, 197 to 201. And our award winner and Speaker of the House, Sherm Packard's done a fantastic job keeping things together. Thank you, Speaker. So, friends, it's time to saddle up. The time to sit on the sidelines is over. We've got this dark cloud of socialism coming towards us, and we're like the cavalry. We've got to stop it. There is nobody else. It's us. And so we need to do that. One thing I'd like to report to you tonight is that we've had a record fundraising day today. We have raised over $382,000. Largest ever for the NHGOP. And I'd just like to say part of that, I won't say all their names, but Anthony and his friends got together and said we need to do something to help the party. All of you who came to the dinner, came to the VIP reception, contributed. And we have 15 subcommittees of volunteers working to help lay the groundwork to win 2024. And that's going to start right here in Manchester this year. So let's go make it happen. Last, I'd like to also thank our executive counselors who are here, Executive Counselor Janet Stevens and Joe Kelly. Thank you so much for coming. And all of our state senators and state representatives who are here, who work for $100 a year, volunteer legislators. Thank you all. Before we get to our award presentation, it's my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our special guest for tonight. He's the 46th governor of Florida, a graduate of Yale and Harvard Law, but he's also the captain of the Yale baseball team, which tells a lot about his toughness. Navy JAG officer, not so much, but as coming from an Army guy, it's like Navy JAG. But he did deploy to Iraq as an advisor to special forces in the Al-Anbar province, which was a tough neighborhood, and he did earn a Bronze Star on duty. He's a former prosecutor. He prosecuted, bad people who did bad things to children and was very successful. And he's continuing that today as governor of Florida, enacting pro-family legislation in education that's helping keep our kids safe. Thank you, Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm Granite State welcome to Governor Ron DeSantis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on the record-setting fundraising performance. I bring greetings from the free state of Florida. I take credit for the nice warmth and sunshine that I brought with me from down south today here in New Hampshire. We're excited to be here. I'll tell you, I was born and raised in Florida, and it's only been recently that we've developed a sense of state pride ourselves. We're proud to have stood up for freedom over these last few years, especially when it wasn't easy. We did it our own way, and we're proud of that. But I must admit, we draw inspiration from the people here in New Hampshire, because more than any other state,
you don't mince words when it comes to your stand regarding liberty. You say it very clearly: live free or die. With no income tax or no sales tax, you have choice in education, you've protected students against COVID shot mandates. I'd say when it comes to freedom in New England, New Hampshire has no peer. So congratulations on doing what's right. But the reality is, throughout our country, we are engaged in a battle to preserve the cause of liberty. Ronald Reagan used to say that freedom is only one generation away from extinction, that it's not something that's passed along in the bloodstream. It must be cultivated and it must be protected. And I must say, for most of my adult life, while I appreciated the sentiment, I thought it was a little bit of hyperbole. You know, after all, we're Americans, right? Isn't freedom in our DNA? But I got to tell you, I don't think you could have lived through the last few years and think that President Reagan was wrong. He was right. Freedom is fragile. It can be squandered. And we're very proud in Florida of earning the moniker of the free state of Florida, but that was not preordained. We came very close 4.5 years ago to taking a much different path. I got elected governor in 2018 by 32,000 votes out of more than 8 million votes cast. Less than 0.5% was my margin of victory. And to be honest, that was not out of character for Florida. The previous decade, if you looked at governor races, president races, 2010, 12, 14, 16, 18, yeah, thank you.
Jews against DeSantis! Jews against DeSantis! Jews against DeSantis!
You got to have a little spice in the speech, right? I mean, you got to have a little fun. Why you'd want to pay the ticket to get in just to do that, I don't know, but different strokes for different folks. So if you look at Florida's history, governor race, president race, 2010, 12, 14, 16, 18, all one-point races. We were the quintessential swing state with a very delicate political balance. So when I was getting ready to take office, people told me, listen, this is a divided state, very close election. You don't want to do anything that's going to upset this balance and maybe tip the scales in the Democrats' favor. So keep your head down. Don't make any waves. Just bide your time and kind of lay low. And I understood that advice. Honestly, it wasn't crazy advice. But I rejected that advice. My view was, I may have earned only 50% of the vote, but that entitled me to wield 100% of the executive power, and I intended to use that to advance the cause of freedom and to advance conservative values in the state of Florida. I understood the different levers of power. I understood the constitutional power, statutory. I understood you had an agenda that you got to fit through a constitutional system of checks and balances, but we were ready to do that. I also said, you know what? When I take office, I am not doing any polls to tell me about different issues. And to this day, I've never taken a single poll as governor about any issue that I've dealt with in the state of Florida. Leaders don't follow polls. Leaders get ahead and they lead and they deliver results, and then the polls move in their direction. We also resolved that we were going to have an administration that was all pulling in the same direction. I told people, because you could be great as governor making decisions, you can have a great vision as an executive. If you don't have a cadre of people working in your administration that's going to carry out those policies effectively, then it's not going to amount to very much. So we made very clear, if you are bringing any other agenda to this administration other than what's in the best interest of the people of Florida and what's in the best interest of supporting our cause, then pack your bags right now. The door is right over there. I don't have time for drama. I don't have time for palace intrigue. I want to make sure that we're executing the agenda. And you know what's happened over the last 4 years? We don't have leaks. We don't have drama. All we do is get the job done day after day, and that means we beat the left day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. I also said I am not going to get into office and be like some Republicans have been, where they get in there and they're almost like a potted plant. They don't want to make decisions. They don't want to do anything. They don't want the media to criticize them. They don't want the left to get on their case. And so sometimes you can just sit back and hope issues don't come to your desk. I said that doesn't work. I'm going on offense. I am going to go and make sure that I am dealing with any issue under the sun that I think can benefit the people of Florida. I sat at the desk in the governor's office my first day 4.5 years ago. I looked around. I said, I don't know who's going to succeed me in this office, but they're not going to have anything to do. I'm getting all the meat off the bone. I'm going to make sure I'm delivering results. And here's the thing. I don't care if the left likes it, and I don't care if the media gets mad at me. I'm pressing forward. I was also mindful that being a governor, or really any executive position, it's different than the typical elected office because it requires you to be a leader. You can be good on policy as an executive, but if you're not a leader, you're ultimately not going to be successful. And leadership is really having the courage to make difficult decisions in the teeth of opposition and criticism. It means you must have the confidence to stand all alone if that's what the situation requires. And so when I became governor and we got into the second year, COVID-19 hit. And I had to make a decision, am I just going to go along with the crowd? Am I going to subcontract out my office to health bureaucrats? Or am I going to take the bull by the horns and make difficult decisions knowing I'm going to invite criticism, knowing I'm going to invite opposition? And indeed, I was criticized during that period more than any governor in the country, bar none. But my job was not to try to protect my own political hide. My job was to protect the jobs of the people that I represented. Their livelihoods were at stake. Their freedom was at stake. And I was the guy that needed to be their champion. So I had to make a choice I'm an old Navy guy, when you're captaining the ship of state, are you going to navigate the boisterous sea of liberty, or are you going to cower in the calm docks of despotism? Many governors did the latter. We stood for freedom, and Florida is better as a result. So that's how we conceived of the role of being a leader, being a governor. So fast forward 4 years, November of 2022. We didn't win by just 32,000 votes. We won by more than 1.5 million votes. We earned the highest percentage of the vote that any Republican governor candidate has ever received in the history of the state of Florida. We won 62% of Hispanic voters. We won independents by 18%. We won very populous, previously blue Miami-Dade County by double digits. But it's not just about me. I was leading the ticket, but we worked hard to make sure that we'd have coattails and that people up and down the ballot would succeed. Because of those efforts, we now have the largest supermajorities in the Florida legislature than we've ever had. We were able to elect 29 conservative school board members throughout the state of Florida. We now have school boards standing up for parents' rights and curriculum transparency. We have, for the first time since the Civil War, not a single solitary Democrat elected to statewide office in the Sunshine State. When I took office, we had almost 300,000 more Democrats registered to vote in Florida than Republicans, and we had never, in the history of Florida, had more registered Republicans than Democrats. By the time I ran in 2022, we had 300,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. But it gets even better. Since the election, We've continued to add Republicans at a great pace, and so even though we were 300,000 up in November of 22, today I stand here before you, there are 455,000 more registered Republicans in the state of Florida than registered Democrats. And so when all the dust of this settled, there was a headline in one of the legacy media outlets that said this, quote, "There's no plan, there's nothing. Florida Democrats in despair over the future." That is what you call winning as Republicans. Now, we're proud that voters have responded to our leadership. We're proud that people are looking to Florida for leadership. But it's easy to see why. We are leading the nation on a whole host of issues. We are number one in the country and have been for many years now for net in-migration. We are the number one fastest growing state in the United States. First time Florida's been number one since 1957. We're number one in new business formations. We're number one in tourism. We're number one in economic freedom by some measures, because your governor would point out there's other measures that say New Hampshire's, but let's just say Florida and New Hampshire are near the top in economic freedom, and we're both proud of that. We are number one in education freedom. We're number one in parental involvement in education, and our public higher education system is ranked number one in America by U.S. News and World Report. So we lead not merely with words, but with deeds. You know, politics is not entertainment. It's not about building a brand or virtue signaling on social media. Ultimately, it's about delivering results. And our record of Florida producing results has been second to none. Our success has shown that leadership matters and that boldness is rewarded. If I had listened to the people that urged caution, I don't believe we would have won by 1.5 million votes. I think the only reason we were able to do that and build such a big majority is because people saw me willing to lead by conviction. They didn't have to wonder where I stood on any issue. They knew that I was out there fighting for what I believe in. But here's the thing. I think what we've done in Florida is applicable to every state in this country. Because when it comes to vision, when it comes to principles, when it comes to policies, the people, not just in Florida, but throughout this country, they side with us over the political left. Just look at what they want to see with fiscal and tax policy. They want sanity when it comes to tax and spend. They don't want inflationary policies. They don't want crippling debt, and they don't want confiscatory taxation. We in Florida, like you, have no income tax. You know, your New England neighbors should try it sometime. It works out pretty well when you don't have an income tax. My state of Florida has millions of more people now than the state of New York does. That's a recent change. And even though we have millions more people, New York's state budget is over twice the size of the budget of the state of Florida. Yet our roads are better, our services are better, and our education system performs better. What are they doing with all that money that they're taxing people and spending people with? We have a record budget surplus. Last year, the budget surplus for Florida was $23 billion. That's more than the budgets of many states in this country. And we have the second lowest per capita debt burden anywhere in the country. Last year, because I have a line item veto power, which I think all governors should have and the President of the United States should have, we vetoed 3% of the budget, $3.3 billion of wasteful spending that we lined out to make sure that we have a strong surplus. So we're right on fiscal. They're wrong on fiscal. And you can see how many Americans have suffered as a result of their gratuitous spending and debt policies. When you print trillions of dollars, when you spend and borrow trillions of dollars, of course you were going to have inflation. Of course that was going to happen. That has been an invisible tax that has hammered middle income and working class people for the entirety of Joe Biden's presidency. You want to end inflation, vote Joe Biden out of office. The people want to see us uphold law and order. They reject what happens in left jurisdictions, rioting and disorder. We, in the state of Florida, said no to defunding the police. We said no to the BLM riots, and we made sure if you riot or loot or engage in mob violence, you don't get a slap on the wrist like they do in Portland. You get the inside of a jail cell because you're held accountable. We also understand that these district attorneys that are getting elected, usually with massive contributions from people like George Soros, represent a threat to the rule of law. They want to pick and choose which laws to enforce. They want to weaponize the power of their offices to target people they don't like. And when we had an attorney like that, a district attorney in Tampa that had been funded by Soros and said he would not uphold the laws of the state, I removed him from his post. He is gone. The people also stand with us in supporting the concept that our schools are about education, not political indoctrination. We want to have the rights of parents upheld. We want to do like we did in Florida and ban critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. You shouldn't be using tax dollars to teach our kids to hate our country or to hate each other. We also believe, and I see the education issues through the lens not just of a governor, but also of a dad. We have a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old at home, and my wife and I are very concerned about what goes on in the school system. And I think parents should be able to send their kid to 2nd grade, let them watch cartoons, just let them be kids, without having somebody's agenda shoved down their throat. It is wrong to tell a 2nd grader that they were born in the wrong body. It is wrong to tell students they can change their gender. And I don't care if Disney doesn't like that. I am standing up for the truth, and I'm standing up for what is right. We also need to have a higher education system that is rooted in the pursuit of truth, academic integrity, and giving students the foundation so they can think for themselves and be citizens of our republic, not have the system used for political activism or to promote quote-unquote social justice. And part of that effort in Florida, we're going to be the first state to eliminate from our state universities so-called DEI initiatives. They say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in reality, that's a Trojan horse for leftist ideology to be imposed on the student body through the guise of the administration. No, I think DEI, as it's practiced, more properly stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and it has no part in our public institutions. And in Florida, it will be history very soon. The people also side with us on upholding the rule of law and our national sovereignty. They reject open borders. You want to see what open borders has gotten us? Millions and millions of people pouring across the border illegally, record amounts of fentanyl that the drug cartels are bringing into our country. The media will say when we talk about it, oh, you're not a border state. The fentanyl is in every community in this country. We are seeing, and I'm in Florida, I've got a big state, so I see a lot of people. You have mothers losing kids because they maybe make a bad decision, but when it's laced with fentanyl, they could die as a result of this. And it's all being let in across the southern border because of the Biden agenda. You have criminal aliens coming across the border. You even have people that are on the terror watch list coming across the border. I can tell you in Florida, I'm proud that we've been tough on illegal immigration. We've banned sanctuary cities in our state. We've worked with the Coast Guard for maritime interdictions because we have boats coming from Haiti and other places trying to come illegally. And since August alone, we've repatriated over 11,000 illegal aliens back to Haiti, back to Cuba, and back to other places where they were coming illegally. And as much as these issues I think are very important, there has not been a lot of attention paid to them by media and certainly by the left. The only time they really got interested in this issue was when 50 illegal aliens showed up to Martha's Vineyard. Then they got really upset about that. Now, I believe that we actually need to see the construction of a wall across the southern border if you really want to deal with the drug issues and the immigration issues. And here's what I can say. And some of you have property down there because you told me, but Southwest Florida got hit by a major hurricane in September, Hurricane Ian, and it did a lot of damage, but some of the most catastrophic damage was it actually knocked out the bridge to Pine Island, and it severed the causeway going to Sanibel Island in 3 different places. And these were not state bridges. They weren't state roads. The local officials were telling the residents it's going to be 6 months before you're going to be able to go back and forth by land, by bridge on the island. And so a lot of those residents came to me and they said, Governor, our islands are going to die if it takes 6 months. Can you help us? And, I said, yeah, I'm going to help. And we thought about, ferries. I said, no, we need the bridge. So I got my guys together. I said, listen, I don't want any bureaucracy. I don't want no red tape, no meetings, no anything. Just build the bridges. We don't have 6 months. And so we took it on. I tasked them with it. Pine Island Bridge, instead of taking 6 months, was reopened in 3 days. And I raised that just because these guys are good in Florida that we used. I will send them to the southern border to build the wall. Come on, Joe, put us in, coach. We'll do it. We'll get it done. The people also side with us on wanting to see an economy where businesses focus on their core missions rather than indulging in woke political activism. And what you see happening, and look, some of it's annoying, some of it they're virtue signaling, and it is grating, and honestly, I think, what's going on here, you see Bud Light and doing all this stuff. But some of this stuff, I think, is really insidious. When you look at movements like ESG, environment, social governance, what they are trying to do is they're trying to hijack corporate power in order to advance an ideological agenda. This is an agenda that is hostile to domestic energy production, hostile to people believing in Second Amendment rights, even hostile to traditional conservative Americans in many respects. And that's bad enough. But what makes it even worse is they're doing this outside the traditional constitutional process. They're trying to change policy in this country without ever having to put those ideas up for a vote. And you know why they're trying to do it that way? Because they know there's never any way they could win at the ballot box with this type of an agenda. So in Florida, we're outlawing ESG and our pension investments. We're providing protections for our citizens against woke banking. And we need to make sure that our economy is not politicized, because not only is that bad for conservative policy, it's also bad for optimal economic growth. Finally, the people are with us. They want to see constitutional government upheld as the founders intended. They do not want to see a weaponized, unaccountable bureaucracy. President Reagan used to say the most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Now, when he said that, it was true, but I think most of the impulse of that government mismanagement and overreach was central planning run amok. They said they could end poverty in the 1960s, and they did all these programs and ended up making poverty more intractable than ever. So a lot of it was ideology run amok. But I'll tell you, I think the difference now between then is the way government wields this power is sharper. It's targeted at people that the government doesn't like. And don't believe me, just look at remember the IRS targeting scandal where they were going after conservative groups under the Obama administration? Remember the CMS COVID shot mandate on the nurses? These were nurses that were on the front lines during COVID. Everyone was saying, including me, that they were heroes. Then the next year rolls around and Biden's administration, through no action of Congress never legislated this, unilaterally, they impose a regulation saying nurses and other healthcare people, you either take the mRNA shot or you lose your job. A government that can unilaterally prevent you from putting food on the table is a government that is outside the traditional constitutional structure. Heck, we even saw the FBI target mothers going to school board meetings in Virginia. So this is a big problem. And here's the thing. We know that people are with us on these major issues because the last few years have represented a great test of governing philosophies throughout our country. We've seen jurisdictions pursue a much different path than, for example, we've pursued in Florida. The policies pursued by those cities and states have sparked a mass exodus of productive Americans from jurisdictions governed by leftist politicians trying to impose a leftist agenda. Florida has been the most desired destination for people seeking greener pastures. We have been a promised land of sanity and a citadel of freedom. Now, did you just see the Chicago mayor results that happened? You have a city going down the tubes, and so they elect somebody that's going to put it down the tubes even faster than it had already gone. Well, I can tell you this, Naples property values are going to be going up in the state of Florida. Now, many of these cities and states have elevated ideology over enduring principles. They've harmed their public safety by coddling criminals and attacking the men and women of law enforcement. They've imposed unreasonable burdens on taxpayers to finance unreasonable levels of public spending. They've harmed education by subordinating the rights of parents and students to special interest groups and to ideological indoctrination. And they have imposed medical authoritarianism under the guise of mandates and restrictions, none of which were about your health. It was about them being able to control your behavior. So what is motivating this? This, I submit to you, is the woke mind virus in action. Woke is a form of cultural Marxism. It seeks to divide us based on identity politics. It represents an attack on merit and achievement. It constitutes a war on reason and truth. Don't tell me that babies are born racist. Don't tell me that men can get pregnant. That is not true, and I will not accept it. So we reject woke ideology. We're not going to allow reality and facts and truth to become optional. We'll fight the woke in the schools. We'll fight the woke in the halls of the legislature. We will fight the woke in corporate America. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. In Florida, woke goes to die. Now, here's why this is all important and why this debate needs to be resolved properly throughout our country. The left is playing for keeps in this country. If the Democrats are able to sweep in 2024 with the presidency, the Senate, and the House, they will try to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They will try to abolish the Electoral College. They will try to make Washington, D.C. a state so they can have 2 left-wing Democrat senators for life. And they will try to mandate ballot harvesting nationwide, and they will eliminate all voter ID in all 50 states. Now, say what you want about that. None of us support that. But that just, in fact, is not an agenda that the typical American family are sitting over their dinner table talking about. They're talking about inflation. They're talking about making ends meet. They're talking about crime. They're talking about education. No, that is an agenda that's not seeking to do good policy for our country. That's an agenda that's seeking to render the conservative half of the country second-class citizens. They don't want us to have a voice in our nation's affairs, and they want to ensconce themselves in power. So in times like these, there is no substitute for victory. Republicans need to shake the culture of losing that has developed throughout our party in recent years. The time for excuses is over. We must get it done once and for all. And here's the straight truth. If the election of 2024 is a referendum on Joe Biden and his failed policies And if we provide a fresh vision for American renewal, Republicans will win the White House, the House, and the U.S. Senate. So we cannot get distracted, and we cannot afford to lose, because freedom is hanging in the balance. Now, nobody appreciated the fragility of freedom more than our nation's founding fathers. When they met in Philadelphia in 1787 to craft the Constitution, they came after having studied the history of every republic that had ever existed on God's green earth. And they wanted to identify lessons that they could take with them as they were trying to craft a constitution here for our new republic. And what they noticed was, if you looked at all the examples of republics throughout history, there was really only one thing that every one of them had in common, and it was this: every one of them had failed. And so they really believed that it fell to the United States of America to determine once and for all, could people really govern themselves? Could you have a society based on the idea that our rights come from God, not from government? Could you have a government that rested on the idea of the rule of law rather than the whims of individual men? Or was mankind forever destined to live under various forms of despotism? And they believed that it was us as Americans that would finally answer that question about whether self-government could work at all. Florida is proof positive that we, the people, are not destined for failure. I believe that decline is a choice. I believe success is attainable, and I believe freedom is worth fighting for. Now, fighting for freedom is not easy in this day and age, because the threats to freedom are more complex and widespread than they have been in the past. Yes, the threats can come from an entrenched bureaucrat in D.C., but also a jet setter in Davos, or even a corporation purporting to wield public power. But fight for freedom we must. We must embrace our founding creed, that our rights come not as gift of the government, but from the hand of the Almighty. We must reject the idea that self-government can be subcontracted out to technocratic elites who reduce our existence to mere data points. We must insist on the restoration of timeless constitutional principles so that government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Florida has led the way in preserving what the father of our country referred to as the sacred fire of liberty. It's a fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when 56 men pledged their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor so that we could establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It's a fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg when our nation's first Republican president pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. It's a fire that burned amongst a band of brothers who stormed the beaches of Normandy to liberate a continent and to preserve freedom for the world. It's a fire that burned at the foot of the Berlin Wall in the 1980s when a resolute president stood before communism and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." So it is our responsibility to carry this torch. We don't run from this responsibility. We welcome it. But it won't be easy. Leadership is not cost-free. The left will come loaded for bear. We're all going to have to sacrifice, whether you're running for governor, whether you're a parent going to a school board. You're going to face tax. You're going to face blowbacks. But, you know, I think about what it will take to turn our country around, and the effort that we have to do, while significant, pales in comparison to what others have put on the line for us throughout our country's history. When I used to fly up to Washington, D.C., there was one route that you could take going into Reagan Airport that was flush to the right of the National Mall. And so if you looked out the left side of the plane, you would be able to see these beautiful panoramic views of the Lincoln Memorial, of the reflecting pool, of the Washington Monument, and then up perched on top of Capitol Hill, the beautiful U.S. Capitol building. And you think to yourself, you know, it makes you proud to be an American when you see that and you see what that represents, and the tourists loved it. They would look at it. But you know what I started to figure out after doing that trip a few times, that as important as it was to look out the left side of the plane, the best monuments that our country has were actually out the right side of the plane. Because if you looked out the right side of the plane, you look over the Potomac River, you'd see a lot of very small, nondescript monuments. situated nice and evenly over rolling hills in a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me, and I think this is true, that you could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world, you could have the best Constitution in the world, if you don't have people that are willing to stand up, put on a uniform, risk their lives, and indeed give that last full measure of devotion for those ideals, they ain't going to amount to very much. So we're not called upon to give sacrifices at that level. We're called upon merely to stand our ground, to be firm in the fight, to be courageous, and to be strong. I am very proud of what we have accomplished in the state of Florida, but I can tell you this, I have only begun to fight. Thank you all. God bless the great state of New Hampshire. Live free or die. Thank you. Thank you very much. Congratulations on a very successful dinner. Thank you all. You want me to stay up here, right?
I'm going to give you a little gift.
Okay.
Great. That was great, Governor. Yeah. Okay, thank you all. Governor, thank you for those inspiring words. Maybe instead of people moving to Florida, maybe you could move up here. But
I shall return.
Great. Just as a small token of appreciation, we have from Pearl and Sons Farm. He's a state senator. I think he's sitting over here somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. One of our great state senators put together a gift basket of maple syrup products.
Goodness.
I venture to say the best in New Hampshire. And so we'll give this to your team to take back for you.
Yes.
And thank you.
I've got 3 kids that love waffles and pancakes, and so that's a good use.
Okay, at this point, we're going to have our award presentation. The governor's going to remain up here to assist. It's my distinct privilege to announce that this year's Meldrum Thompson Jr. Principles Above Politics Chairman's Award is presented to our good friend and just unbelievable public servant, Speaker of the House, Sherman Packard. Please join us on the stage. And Tom Thompson, would you please join us? The Governor Meldrum Thompson Jr. Principle Above Politics Chairman's Award is presented to an individual who has demonstrated courageous and principled leadership. Nominations can be made by any New Hampshire Republican, and the recipient is chosen by the state chairman in close consultation with the children of the living in New Hampshire of the late Governor and Mrs. Meldrum Thompson Jr. Today, Tom Thompson, the son of the governor, will present the award to a great friend of all Republicans who, in a very difficult time during COVID, our beloved speaker, Dick Hinch, passed away suddenly, only a matter of weeks after he attained the gavel. Sherm was thrust like Cincinnatus in Roman times into a job that he did not fight for, he didn't necessarily want, but we as a people of New Hampshire asked him to serve the people. He's done so courageously, with courage, conviction, and with a slim majority won the speaker race with one vote. So there was no contention. People recognized that Sherm was the right man at the right time. Thank God he accepted that. This award now will be presented by Tom Thompson to Sherm. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay. Dinner will be served. I have one small announcement. There's this awesome book called The Courage to Be Free, and I would encourage folks to pick it up to read it if they can. One announcement as they're bringing dinner out, the record fundraising, $382,000, $132,000 of that came in because Governor DeSantis asked some of his supporters to help out New Hampshire. So $132,000 came from the governor's request. So Governor, thank you for asking your supporters to help us here. We sure appreciate it. Thank you. Dinner is served.